It was October of 1864, and the final climactic battle of the Shenandoah Valley was about to be fought. The Army of the Shenandoah, commanded by General Philip Sheridan and numbering approximately 32,000 officers and men, was encamped north of Cedar Creek with its headquarters at Belle Grove, a majestic late 18th century plantation manor house. Sheridan had taken control of the valley by recently defeating Lieutenant General Jubal Early at the battles of 3rd Winchester and Fisher's Hill. Early, at this time, was reduced to 12,000 poorly equipped and ill-fed men. On October 13th, Early, following Sheridan's army, arrived at Fisher's Hill with 3,000 additional men sent by General Robert E. Lee in Richmond, with a directive from Lee imploring Early to launch an offensive to regain the valley for the Confederacy. On October 15th, Sheridan traveled to the capital in order to confer on future movements. He left General Horatio Wright in temporary command, feeling secure that he would return before any significant events occurred in the valley. With the Union Army's left flank known to be strongly anchored on the natural barriers of the Shenandoah River, the obvious choice for Early seemed to be to attack the Union right. Not only was that flank in the air, meaning it lacked any natural strength, but the open ground to the northwest, off the map, gave the Confederates plenty of room to maneuver. However, Major General John Bell Gordon, Early's second-in-command, devised an unexpected alternative. Toiling up the steep slopes of Massanutten Mountain on October 17th, Gordon and several other officers reached Signal Knob, where they met an inspiring panorama. The entire lower Shenandoah Valley was visible. More importantly, they had a perfect view of the Union Army. One officer recalled, "There the Union Army was, with the roads leading to it, the place where he could be best attacked and how the lines could move, how far to go and what to do, just like a large map." East of the Valley Pike were the 5,200 men of the Union 8th Corps, known as the Army of West Virginia, commanded by Brigadier General George Crook, an entrenched division commanded by Colonel Joseph Thoburn, and future President of the United States Colonel Rutherford B. Hayes's division camped across a broad open plateau. Next in line on the west side of the Valley Pike was the 19th Corps, commanded by Brigadier General William Emory, with 2 divisions and 9,100 men entrenched on the bluffs above Cedar Creek. The 6th Corps, commanded by Major General Wright, was encamped on high ground to the north, locally known as Red Hill. Protecting the Army's right were 2 divisions of cavalry, commanded by Brigadier General Wesley Merritt and Brigadier General George Custer, located 2 miles upstream off the map. Despite the long odds, Early agreed upon the plan and put it into motion on the night of October 18th. It was, taken as a whole, one of the riskiest and most audacious assaults attempted during the entire Civil War. The march started at dusk near Fisher's Hill, south of Strasburg. The men were ordered to maintain absolute silence. The largest force, under Gordon, crossed the Shenandoah River and began its trek along the base of the Massanutten. They splashed through the chilly waters of the Shenandoah before dawn at 2 locations and took up their attack positions concealed by a dense fog that blanketed the area during the night. Meanwhile, the 2 other prongs of the Confederate attack also moved into position through Strasburg before splitting. A 3,000-man division commanded by Major General Joseph Kershaw passed beyond the town and crossed Cedar Creek below Colonel Thoburn's position. Finally, Brigadier General Gabriel Wharton, followed by all of the Confederate artillery totaling 34 cannon manned by 1,000 men, marched along the Valley Pike to their assigned starting point. By 4 a.m. on October 19, 1864, Early's 3 columns were poised to launch their surprise attacks. But more importantly, Early had managed to place approximately 9,100 men combined against the isolated 5,200 men in the Union 8th Corps. That attack began around 4:30, when Kershaw's division rolled out of the heavy fog before dawn against Colonel Thoburn's 8th Corps position, striking the Union camp completely by surprise. Most northern soldiers, given little or no warning, were still in their tents, and the few defenders who managed to form a line were quickly overwhelmed. Within minutes, Thoburn's division was routed and fleeing. Upon hearing Kershaw's guns, Gordon quickly ordered his 3 divisions to strike Colonel Hayes's hastily formed battle line. At the same time, General Wharton's division advanced down the valley pike to threaten the front of the 19th Corps. The long roll was sounded in the Union camps, and the men quickly filed into their entrenchments. Their commander, General Emory, however, faced a dilemma. He was threatened from 2 directions. Wharton's line moved against his front, while 8th Corps fugitives fleeing through his lines alerted Emory that the most serious danger was from his left rear. Reacting quickly and without orders, Emory ordered Colonel Stephen Thomas's small brigade of 1,500 men to bolster the hard-pressed 8th Corps, knowing the order meant the sacrifice of Thomas's men. Thomas moved across the pike and positioned his men in a woodlot, placing them squarely in the path of Gordon's overwhelming onslaught. Colonel Hayes's line was decimated and forced to fall back beyond the valley pike. This left Thomas's small brigade to face, according to one of his men, the swarming enemy which broke upon them with almost resistless fury. The fight that followed was bitter and hard fought, as the small band of Union soldiers, attacked from 3 directions, tenuously clung to their position. At one point, men fought hand to hand with bayonet and clubbed musket. At the same time, Kershaw's division continued its advance and struck the 19th Corps. With the Union left gone, General Emory realized his position could not be held and ordered his men to withdraw. Thomas's brigade held off the Confederates for almost 30 minutes, allowing the 19th Corps to retreat. During that time, Thomas lost nearly 70% of his strength before finally retreating. By 5:45, the 8th Corps had disintegrated, and the entire left flank of the Union Army had collapsed. At this point, parts of the 19th Corps were pulled together into a ragged battle line near Belle Grove. General Wright hoped this would give the shattered 8th Corps and other units time to reform to the rear and allow the only intact infantry corps, the 6th, time to move to the front. By 6 a.m., the victorious Confederate forces under Gordon and Kershaw, joined by General Wharton's division moving down the Valley Pike, combined to continue their attack. Union soldiers scrambled to evacuate the Army's headquarters at Belle Grove, while the 6th Corps set up its main line of battle to the rear, along the northern bank of Meadow Brook and near Middletown. By 7 o'clock, the Union line around Belle Grove was forced to retreat, as the Union headquarters fell to the southern advance. Soon after, Early's combined forces brought the main 6th Corps line under assault. Understanding the importance of the Valley Pike as the Army's only line of communication, supply, and possible retreat, General Wright ordered the bulk of his cavalry from his right flank over to his left in order to protect the pike. Kershaw's men managed to force a crossing of Meadow Brook, pushing back the Union right where the combat intensified. General Wharton's division continued to move down the Valley Pike. Forcing the final division of the Union 6th Corps, commanded by Brigadier General George Getty, to retreat to a prominent hill overlooking Middletown, the site of the town's cemetery, around 8 a.m. The struggle for Cemetery Hill that followed turned out to be one of the most critical of the entire battle. Getty had found the only defensible position in the area and formed his 2,500-man division through and on either side of the cemetery tombstones. Part of the 6th Corps formed a ragged line to Getty's right as Kershaw's and Gordon's divisions pressed their advance. Soon after, General Wharton's division, supported by other Southern units, brought Getty's line under attack. This initial Southern assault was uncoordinated and was repulsed, but was quickly followed by a second attack. Also repulsed. In frustration, Early amassed nearly all of his artillery along the Valley Pike and began to pound Getty's position. During this time, the Union 6th and 19th Corps continued their withdrawal to the rear, where officers rallied the shaken troops into the semblance of a battle line. After a 30-minute bombardment of Getty's line, Early ordered a third attack, which also included a movement outflanking Getty's right. After holding for 90 minutes and now facing overwhelming odds, Getty withdrew. Of a demoralizing defeat. To most, the battle was over. Cedar Creek appeared to be a stunning Confederate victory. Early assumed the Union Army was preparing for a full retreat north. He thus ordered his lines to advance to the northern outskirts of Middletown, but would push them no further. Believing his own men were too exhausted, and his lines were weakened by the loss of men who were plundering the Union camps, Early felt the best he could do was to hold what had been gained. Those gains were quite impressive and included over 1,000 prisoners and 24 Union cannon. Despite this success, Gordon urged his commander to continue the advance. Frustrated, he later called this delay the fatal halt. During this debate, Early, Gordon, and the rest of the Confederate Army heard cheering from the Union lines. Although they did not know it, this celebration marked the arrival of Union Commander General Philip Sheridan, and with him a turning point in the tide of the battle. Returning by horseback that morning, Sheridan had no idea of the disaster that had befallen his army. Soon, however, the sounds of battle reached him, followed by fleeing Union soldiers spreading rumors of defeat. Riding hard, he rallied soldiers along the way and arrived on the field around 10:30. Sheridan's ride, as it became known, would later be celebrated in art and poetry, and forever cemented his status in American history. Sheridan immediately rejected all suggestions to order a full-scale retreat, and instead began to plan for a counterattack. In order to restore his haggard army's morale, Sheridan then rode along the length of his rallying battle lines, which the men, according to one veteran, greeted with a perfect frenzy of enthusiasm. Preparations for a counterattack commenced immediately, but took some hours to complete. This included a final adjustment of his infantry lines and the shifting of part of his cavalry back to his right flank. Early made one final half-hearted effort to advance around 1 p.m., but Union resistance quickly convinced him to call off the attack. This move resulted in a final adjustment of his lines, with his left forming along Miller's Lane and his right east of Middletown. His plan was to secure his captured spoils and hold on until darkness could cover his withdrawal from the field. By 4 p.m., Sheridan had positioned his forces, and soon after ordered his counterattack to begin. Bugles sounded, and the lines of blue, over 2 miles long, swept forward. Hoping to quickly overwhelm the smaller Confederate army, Sheridan instead saw his advance met stiff and determined resistance. The northern lines were greeted by a withering volley, which, according to one Union soldier, was so sudden and terrible, the line at once became completely paralyzed and was brought to a dead halt. The situation turned from bad to worse, as Early's army not only held their thin lines, but then launched a small counterthrust, which briefly turned the Union right flank. The fate of the battle hung in the balance for a few moments before the Union right rallied and pushed back. At this critical moment, the Union cavalry on the far right, commanded by Major General George Custer, launched a devastating charge across the open fields beyond the Confederate left. Although the main Confederate line along Miller's Lane continued to hold, and the Confederate right repulsed the Union attack against them, disaster quickly unfolded along the Confederate left. With their flank turned, Early's left wing had no choice but to fall back and form a new line. Custer pushed his cavalry and struck this position hard. The Confederate line soon unraveled from its left to right. The Confederate retreat quickly turned into a rout, as the exhausted and now demoralized Southern soldiers fled the field as rapidly as possible in order to save themselves. By 5 p.m., the Confederate Army of the Valley ceased to exist. Losses included over 300 ambulances and wagons, 200 horses, hundreds of small arms, 48 cannon, including all 24 the Union Army had lost that morning, and over 1,000 prisoners. The final cost of the battle was also extremely high. Although victorious, the Union Army had suffered nearly 5,700 casualties, including over 570 killed. The Confederates lost approximately 2,900 men, over 20% of their army. The combined losses totaled nearly 8,600 killed, wounded, and missing, all of them Americans. The Battle of Cedar Creek was a momentous Union victory and had far-reaching impacts, both military and political. The battle not only crushed further Confederate resistance in the Shenandoah Valley, but also occurred just 3 weeks before the presidential election, greatly bolstering Abraham Lincoln's chances for re-election. Philip Sheridan's inspirational leadership and timely arrival that day had literally snatched a victory from the jaws of defeat. For the Confederacy, Cedar Creek was a humiliating disaster, and one of a string of numerous setbacks that fall and winter, which ultimately led to final defeat at Appomattox Courthouse 6 months later.